So, moving on, we have Shubashni, who's here to talk to us about rebooting, resetting, or getting started. Pathways to leadership for women in South Africa and Mauritius. Looking forward to this. So, the same again. I'll just give you a warning when you've got a minute left.
Okay. Hi everyone. Can you see my slides?
It's all good.
It's all good. Okay. So thanks. Good afternoon and good evening to those of you in Australia. So this afternoon, my presentation is on presenting the findings for my PhD study. The paper is was prepared by Professor Linley Lord and Associate Professor Jane Coffey and myself, and I'll be presenting for the team. Okay, so to start off my presentation, I'll just give you a point to ponder on. He, my husband, has never discouraged me. He has always encouraged me in terms of helping me with the children, but I know that he thinks it's too much work for not too much, and it's probably not important that I work. And I don't think he gets the other side of what is important for me, my sense of belonging, my sense of being myself, because my job doesn't define me, but it's what makes me exist, being independent and to be myself, other than being wife or daughter-in-law or daughter of whoever. This is a quotation from one of the participants from Mauritius in terms of her career journey and pathway into a senior executive position. This afternoon, my presentation is going to present my preliminary findings for my study on how women from Mauritius and South Africa transition into senior leadership positions. I took on a very broad challenge when I defined my thesis and area of research. I looked at two concepts, leadership and careers, and this is what I'm hoping all of you here this afternoon may be able to help me with, is to put it together, to bring these two concepts, leadership and women in leadership, and career transition and career progress for women in a corporate context. My presentation will start with an introduction, a very brief overview of the research methodology, and then I'll present the key findings under two streams. The first is the key findings of how women from Mauritius and South Africa conceptualize leadership. What is leadership for women from sub-Saharan Africa and a developing community? And the second set of findings would be the pathway that these women followed and how they broke through the glass ceiling and successfully transitioned into senior leadership and executive positions. So for, I'm sure many of you know a little bit about Africa and the African context, but Mauritius and South Africa are two sub-Saharan African countries. Okay, they both are described as high middle income economies. And according to the Global Gender Gap Report, South Africa is ranked 18 on the Global Gender Gap Report and Mauritius 110. Okay, so as you can see, it's very, very extreme rankings. What's really interesting about it is when we delve into these countries, we find that both these countries have embedded gender equality and equal opportunity in their respective constitutions. Okay, with South Africa, with the abolishment of apartheid and when the constitution was written, a lot of emphasis was placed on equality, racial equality, as well as gender equality. And Mauritius amended its constitution in 1994 to include a commitment towards gender equality. Both countries also have some very sound anti-discrimination and equality legislations in place. Okay, they have ratified several key conventions for the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Yet, you find that women are still underrepresented in senior management and leadership positions. Okay, so my presentation is a little bit different. One of the questions we are asking ourselves is, are we rebooting or are we reimagining leadership, right? When we look at developing countries or the African region, or are we just getting started? Okay. Many of the women from the study are first generation women leaders in corporate, right? And from the transcripts, you find that when they were narrating their stories about their life, their early life experiences, right? Many of them described it as being a very tough and harsh environment. So let's look a little bit about what's happening, okay? When we look at it, when you see the statistics, right, you find that women have progressed since 2017. We've seen around a 6-7% increase in the proportion of women that hold senior leadership positions globally. Okay, Africa, the region, is the leader. 39% of senior management positions are held by women in the African region, closely followed by the Asian region. But when we look closer at Africa, what do we see? Right? Only 5% of CEOs are women. Right? 29% of senior managers are women. Okay? And what you would also find here, that only 36% of women are promoted when promotional opportunities arise for senior leadership and executive positions. 44% of women are stuck in line management roles. Right? So this is quite alarming, and this is where my research is based. So what I aimed to look at is, how did these women who hold these positions break through the glass ceiling? What is it that they did that enabled them to successfully transition and perform in senior leadership positions? I interviewed 28 women, and 14 women from South Africa, 14 women from Mauritius. For the women in South Africa, I conducted Skype interviews, and where Skype did not work, I used Google Meet, WhatsApp, and yes, Google Meet and WhatsApp. For the Mauritian participants, these were face-to-face interviews, okay, held in Mauritius at a place convenient for these women. How did I recruit participants? This was the major challenge that I had. It took me up to a year to secure interviews with many of my Mauritian participants. I relied very heavily on social media, right? So I used LinkedIn, Facebook, reached out to women, did searches on LinkedIn, and sent out messages describing my research and asking people to participate. Okay, so I screened through profiles, ensuring that the women all held senior leadership positions. Data analysis started off with transcripts. At the beginning, I organized the transcript material under the research questions. So all extracts relating to the conceptualization of leadership, and then all extracts relating to the career trajectory of these women. Okay. And yeah, so let's go and look at some of my findings. Okay, so the first set of findings was on how do women conceptualize leadership? What is leadership for women from Mauritius and South Africa? So here I've grouped them into 5 themes. Okay, Ubuntu, collaborative, setting direction, developing others, and transformational. Okay, so I'm going to explain, due to time constraints, I may not be able to explain all, but I'm going to explain a few of them. The first one is Ubuntu, right? The majority of women from South Africa conceptualized conceptualized leadership through the Ubuntu philosophy. Okay, so the Ubuntu philosophy is an African philosophy that that states, I am because you are. Okay, it's about achieving, working together through the community, through building trust and respect, and through consensus making and consensus decision making. So when you look at the Ubuntu conceptualization of leadership, right, it's not about I, right, it's about the collective good of everyone. So many of the participants, right, described Ubuntu in their conceptualization of leadership. Leadership embodied respect, trust, right, and empowerment. So it very much embodied growing together and working together. A second very interesting point that came up in the South African women's conceptualization of leadership, right, was the concept that the title and the position does not make you a leader. It's what you do. And the diversity and the inclusivity that is required in African leadership makes African leadership very, very unique. For the Mauritian participants, their conceptualization of leadership very, very much stemmed from teamwork, right? They defined leadership as working together as a team, working to achieve outcomes. And given that Mauritius is a country that has no natural resources and relies heavily on professional qualifications and knowledge work, these women conceptualize leadership as helping people work together so that the organization does well and performs well. So if good leadership means collaboration and teamwork. A fundamental, another very interesting point in the conceptualization of leadership was the commitment to developing others. Right? Both South African and Mauritian women spent a lot of time building their human capital and their intellectual capital. With the South African women, helping people, mentoring people, coaching individual and structured leadership and career development programs, very much embedded in their conceptualization of leadership. The second part of my research was on how do these women, right, progress into senior leadership positions. And here I've grouped that into three. I'm trying to set up a stepping stone model, 3 phases. Okay, this part is not completely defined, but basically, how do these women progress? They progress through building their foundation, right? All of the women, Mauritian and South African, were high achievers, right? Primary school, secondary school, throughout university. All of them, right, had as role models strong women within their lineage. They spoke about grandmothers, mothers, sacrifices by parents. Okay, so how hard work was very embedded in their culture and in their lineage. And while they may describe that they were raised in a gender neutral environment, in their early life experiences and early education experiences, they did experience subtle sexism, right? For example, in the home environment, there were things like, I would like to get my driver's license. And their father would say, no, it's okay for your brother to have his driver's license and he can take you where you want to go, but you cannot have your driver's license. So these were the battles that they faced within their home environment. The stepping stones. Now, if you look at the slide on the left-hand side, these were the challenges that the women faced, right? South African and Mauritian women. On the right-hand side, what you're finding is how these women overcame those challenges. Okay, so when in the stepping stones, once they entered the corporate environment, many of these women experienced exclusionary practices. For example, one woman said, diversity is being invited to the dance. However, inclusion is being at the dance and being asked to dance. Right now, you still find the boys' club. The boys will go out and play golf. And I still remember saying to someone one day, you know, I've been in this company for so long, but not once did they actually say, do you play golf? Do you want to join us? But it's something that the boys do. I'm only one of 2. Sorry, Owen, I'm right. I know the other one is that I'm not interested at all. Okay, but as she said, I would like to be invited. A second challenge that these women face, right, is the motherhood penalty, right? The moment you declare that you are expecting a child or you have young children, you've been asked to choose. Okay, so what we find here is that these women had to overcome these challenges through making conscious decisions, right? Being very much aware of their leadership aspirations and having very meaningful interactions with CEOs, sponsors, mentors, right? And in South Africa, through structured leadership development programs, and in Mauritius, through sheer hard work and breaking stereotypes. Through sheer hard work and breaking stereotypes. Many of these women describe corporate South Africa and corporate Mauritius as tough, harsh. The corporate world will eat you alive. They are watched more closely, they meaning women. But once you reach there, people love you. They love supporting you, they do. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? I hope I've been on time.
Hey, look, you were fantastic. I was caught between trying to unmute myself and doing the applause icon on the thing. There you go. I've managed to do the applause one. I thought that was really rich and fantastic. And again, you know, another example actually of a really rich empirical context. So, I mean, I've got a couple of things I could ask, but I'm wondering if somebody else would like to come in first, because we kind of had a rush at the end last time, and I'd like to give other people more of a chance to speak, really. Okay, well, I'll ask a warm-up question. So mine would be, I'm really intrigued by two things in particular. The first is around Ubuntu, and so I've been talking. I'm developing a Black leadership program with a colleague of mine, Fidel, who presented on the opening evening, and Fidel is a big believer in Ubuntu, and we've been talking a bit about it. But I must so Fidel's case is that actually this offers a profound way of reimagining leadership as a concept, but also as a practice. So I'm just wondering if maybe you'd like to talk to that a little bit more.
Okay, so you know, when there's a lot of study on African leadership, right? From a Western perspective. So the studies from a Western perspective were more aimed at how Western leaders can adapt and operate in an African context. So here, there's a call for more research, especially by Stella Inkopo and many other leadership gurus in the African context, that we really need to study African leadership for what it is, and not only from a male perspective, but also from a female perspective. But when we look at Africa, Africa has a reputation, you know, that it's corrupt, that it's underdeveloped. And this is not actually the case in the region. It's such a highly complex and diverse environment that we cannot paint it in one color. So when you look at Ubuntu and you look at African leadership, it is about respecting who you're speaking to, building trust with everyone, and involving all the stakeholders so that we can come together and do or act for the collective good of the community. Now, we do acknowledge, I mean, women are underrepresented. We have a lot of corporate scandals in South Africa, in Mauritius, in other African contexts. So, I mean, there is the irony of it. But on the whole, when you look at the Ubuntu, it's all about working with the diversity within the people. It's about working with the communities and reaching out to all the stakeholders so we can reach consensus. So yeah, that's, I hope I answered your question there.
You did, and this idea of you can't exist without me and vice versa is just a really interesting way of rethinking leadership, I think. I had one more on reproduction, but if anybody else wants to put their hands up in the meantime. That's great. So what jumped off the screen for me was the way you really nicely navigated the different realms of, sorry, I'll use kind of more sort of technical Marxist type language now, but the realms of work and home, sorry, of production and reproduction and work and home. And I really loved the way you brought one into the other and explored some of the interdependencies. So I'm just wondering if either you'd like to say a bit more about that relationship between home and work in leadership and becoming a leader or developing leadership practice, or you know, if you've got any broader reflections really for the field on that.
Okay, when we look at it, when you look at the exclusion of women, in one of the key differences I've identified, and this is where I would like the audience to, you know, marrying these two concepts. This is my challenge right now. I'm actually writing the discussion section for my research, and my challenge is how am I marrying the leadership theory with the career theory with the gender. So if I'm really I really hope someone can shed some light on that. But in terms of it, if you look at the Mauritian woman and the South African woman, one of the key things when you look at diversity, you look at corporate South Africa and the tough environment, is that South African women, when it came to starting a family, they went into consultancy. So they eased out of corporate, and when they were ready, they eased back into corporate. Do you see that? Whereas when you look at the Mauritian women, they didn't take anything. They went on, they got married, they had children, and they went on working as hard, if not harder, than their male counterparts, studying, building their human capital, meeting deadlines, and so on. And now when they reflect on their careers, reflect on their careers, they have these feelings of guilt. So when I had asked them, you know, what are you doing to facilitate the progress of younger women? South African women were like, I speak at schools, I'm involved in diversity committees. Mauritian women were like, I need to spend more time with my children. So there were very strong feelings of guilt because they literally had to choose. And I think the cultural context of Mauritius made it very difficult for these women, very, very challenging for these women.
I mean, I suspect that's something that was obviously very explicit in your research, but probably would be reflected in other contexts to different extents as well. And maybe this sort of interdependency of, sorry, not interdependency, the feed over from domestic and reproductive poles and work poles isn't something that's been explored enough in leadership. So I kind of explicitly, I didn't want to put anyone on the spot here, but I'm just wondering in particular, Shelley, if any of the issues that have been raised in Shubashni's, yeah, there you go. So you preempted me. So Shelley has said, a forthcoming resource from ILA members is African Leadership, Powerful Paradigms for the 21st Century. Brilliant. And there's Shelley now. So over to you.
Wonderful research and presentation in an area that is underexplored. And so Rob Elkington and Faith Njeri and Gloria Burgess are coming together as the lead editors of the book I pasted into the chat, which will be one of probably 3 books on African leadership from African perspectives.
Okay.
And I know that within the shameless plug here, warning, the International Leadership Association, we have nearly 700 members who are Mandela Washington Fellows, young leaders in Africa, 25 to 35 years old, doing amazing work. And so if anybody is looking for some other research participants, that could be a really solid base of folks to work from. There goes my iPad. So I would encourage you to get in touch with me if anybody is looking for research participants or Shubashni.
Shubashni, that's fine. Yes.
I'd be happy to follow up later offline if you're still looking for any kind of comments. Or Faith is now based in Kenya, and she's a scholar there, so I could help with some connections potentially.
Okay, thank you, Shelley.
And there's been a flurry of activity in the chat. So I posted the link for the ILA's Women in Leadership Conference, but see, you can just have that if it's interesting to you. The Gender Work and Organization Conference as well is supposed to be next year in Colombia. I say supposed to because, who knows with COVID and so on. And so I wanted to read out Julia's comment. One thing that may be of more importance to women is time. Even now, I had to rush downstairs to help members of my family. It means what time is available may be for multiple purposes, and leadership is not a single focus, but one of many thoughts. Traditional leadership roles tend to expect a total focus on time, ? Really powerful question. So if you have any reflections on that.
Yes, Julia, thank you. That's a very, very good question. Yes, let me just give you a bit of context. So I'll start up with Mauritius, right? So many of these women, actually 13 of the 14 women who participated in the study worked in the private sector for multinational companies. So with the time difference, you see, and this is where their struggle stemmed from. With the time difference, when it's 8 o'clock in Mauritius, it's what, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning in the UK. In USA, it's a completely different time zone. And these are professional women with university qualifications or professional qualifications from the UK and Ireland and USA and so on. And so their workday actually starts at noon and ends around 8 p.m. And this was one of the biggest challenges that they faced, that at some point in time, they literally had to choose to go up the corporate ladder or to take on a role where they had more control over their time and their working hours. On the other hand, they accepted it. They accepted it because, again, they said that this brings in revenue for the country. So this is where the context comes in. Being a small island economy, which relies on foreign direct investment and relies on foreign companies investing for the human capital in Mauritius because it's bilingual. So they could see that there was job creation. And a lot of the challenges that they raised, the participants said it's the first time they were interviewed for a research project on their life. And they agree with putting in creche facilities, childcare facilities, and so on. But at the end of the day, when your meeting ends at 8 p.m., do you really want your child in a creche till 8 p.m. at night? So these are some of the realities. For the South African women, some of the comments around the time issue was, again, the traditional leadership. Many of their male executive peers have stay-at-home wives. So everything associated with the home environment and domestic work is taken care of by the stay-at-home wife. And so all they need to focus on is their job. So again, when it comes to traveling, much easier for them because for their male peers. Women relied very heavily, both South African and Mauritian women relied very heavily on domestic help and extended family. This was the personal support that they had. A few Mauritian women actually spoke about very supportive spouses in the sense that they put their careers on hold because the chances of career success in the areas that the women were qualified in was much better for their socio-economic status. So again, this comes back to the issue of money because a lot of the participants were first generation graduates. And so their parents were not equipped to provide them with their career support. I hope I answered your question, Julia.
You did. That was brilliant. So thanks ever so much, Shubashni. Great paper, great presentation. There's a couple more things in the chat, but you can catch up on those. Okay.